Good evening. I'm Shelby Williams, Plano City Council, Place 5. Tonight is January 27th, and this is our second City Council recap of the year. So we started with the preliminary open meeting, and we appointed David Mayorani to Community Relations Commission as an interim member. Then we had the FY19 audit results from the GFOA. This is the 38th year running to earn the Government Office of Accounting Certificate of Achievement. Now, the audit means that our books were clean, and that's actually how they characterized this audit. It was a very clean audit. And we had no adjustments or errors or unusual transactions. So in other words, no funny business in our books. We had an environmental health and sustainability departmental report. We covered environmental health with proactive control measures, environmental quality, and sustainability and environmental education. Now, I took down some interesting tidbits. Google Plano restaurant grades to see how each restaurant in Plano is graded according to our inspections. We have 1,734 active food permits, 424 pool permits, and 488 mosquito traps. That's going to be important here in a couple of months. And we have collected 115 tons of litter dropped. Now, that's great, but consider that means that people dropped 115 tons of litter. So if you see somebody littering, tackle them to the ground and give them a good lecture without the tackling them to the ground. Chief Drain might have objection to that. Then we had a municipal court presentation with Judge Stevenson, the municipal court judge. A couple things I didn't know about. We have a teen court with about 40 teens every year to play the part of prosecutor and defense with what seems real cases. They have cases heard by a teen jury. So you talk about being heard by a jury of your peers. They actually have that on teen basis, and they assign some range of community service hours based on the outcome of the trial, assuming it's not dismissed. And the magistrates from the municipal court deliver the oaths of office to our law enforcement officers and fire personnel. Then we got an update on the Plano Event Center hotel land lease. Now, this was the last presentation given by Parks and Rec Director Robin Reeves, who is retiring after this week after 36 years of service to the city of Plano. So thank you very much, Robin, for a very long career spent with the city. There's going to be a hotel proposed to be built next to the Plano Event Center at Spring Creek and Jupiter, and there are 920 existing parking spaces. Now, the hotel is looking at building a parking garage with 800 spaces, 250 designated for the hotel's use and 550 for the event center. This will free up the western lot of the event center for additional amenities, development, etc. in the future. Now, we are looking at the hotel actually building and managing the garage with us leasing the 550 spaces, the city leasing the 550 spaces for it for the next 20 years for $1.1 million per year. Now, seems like a pretty hefty price tag. At the end of 20 years, we will own those 550 spaces. The hotel will own the 250 that are allotted to the hotel. However, we are anticipating raising up to about $750,000 a year in additional hotel taxes or hot taxes from that hotel, as well as increased property taxes from that hotel, increased sales taxes in the area, and other revenue totaling up to about $750,000. So with the net $350,000, that amounts to about $626 per parking space per year, which will be funded out of the hot tax fund, so not out of the general fund. Hotel taxes, which have to be designated towards specific purposes, will go toward paying for the balance of that until 20 years down the line when the city owns all those parking spaces and we don't have to pay anything except the maintenance. Now, we then moved along to a drainage fee presentation, and very little surprise, this centered on the drainage culvert that has to be built at Cullen Creek Mall. It's just the topography of the area. If we don't do something about the drainage, then it's going to be a great big mess. And the development that is proposed there isn't going to be viable. And the current drainage solution is deteriorating. And even if we left it in place, it wouldn't last long enough. And it would, if the current property was still viable, it would cause problems there in short order. And then Councilwoman Maria Tu gave us a short presentation about the Chinese Lunar New Year, which is happening right around now. An interesting tidbit, she said that for 5 Saturdays in the year 2020, which is the year of the rat, which is the first animal in the Chinese zodiac. So we're starting the whole lunar cycle over with the year of the rat this year. There are going to be 5 Saturdays with double digits: 4/4, April 4th, June 6th, 6/6, 8/8, August 8th, 10/10, October 10th, and 12/12, December 12th, all on Saturdays. And we're told this is the only time this is going to happen in our lifetimes. And it's supposed to signify double prosperity, which could probably make up for the deficit that we're going to have to pay for from the hot tax fund for those parking spaces at the Plano Event Center. So there's looking on the bright side. And then Lily Bao read President Trump's Lunar New Year message. Then we moved on to the regular meeting. Now, first, this is Holocaust Remembrance Day. And we had a rabbi speak about remembering the Holocaust. This is something that we should never forget. This was one of the greatest atrocities of last century, and we have to be diligent to make sure that something like this doesn't happen again. And he noted that members of the Jewish community across the country and across the planet still very much feel anti-Semitism. That's something we need to make sure that gets stamped out and eradicated forever. Then there was a special recognition of the Tom Muhlenbeck Rec Center staff for saving the life of Mr. Sang when he suffered from a cardiac arrest while playing table tennis. Their quick thinking and application of CPR and a nearby AED on the facility, automatic external defibrillator, saved his life. And then he was able to be taken to the hospital with no damage to his brain or mental faculties. So well done, Park Center or Tom Muhlenbeck staff. And I should note that this is the second time in just a few months that Plano Rec Center staff have saved someone's life after a heart attack. The most recent one prior to this was at the Sam Johnson Recreation Center. So don't have a heart attack if you can help it, but if you're going to have a heart attack, Plano Parks and Rec is the place to be. Then we had 4 considerations to support applications for a 9% housing tax credit from the state of Texas for affordable housing. Now, this engendered a very long discussion because 2 proposed affordable housing developments are in competition with one another. One is Park on 14th, and one is Patriot Park Phase 2. Park on 14th is designated as family units. Out of 60 total proposed units, 13 are 2-bedroom. And then Patriot Park Phase 2 is meant as a senior community, primarily senior. And they have 80 proposed units, and it's geared toward veterans. Now, part of the issue that we discussed tonight was the fact that there are a laundry list of rules to determine whether you can even apply for a tax credit, a housing tax credit of 9%. And Park on 14th did not meet the criteria because of the 3-year 1-mile rule, which means within 3 years and within 1 mile, similar developments applying for housing tax credit. And there, like I said, there are a laundry list of rules. One of those rules is that if the county in which you are applying has a population of 1 million, you have to have a waiver, otherwise you're not eligible to apply. Well, Collin County reached the 1 million mark in October. However, after a lot of discussion, there was a monkey wrench thrown in the discussion, in the works. when it seemed there was a discrepancy between how the rules applied for the housing tax credit were applied to the population marker versus the population marker from the county. So this ended up being tabled, but I'll tell you some of the things that were discussed. First, if Park on 14th is going to be able to apply for the 9% housing tax credit from the state of Texas, they do require a waiver and approval by the city of Plano. So if, as I said on the dais, this is nothing new. If this were to be considered in a vacuum and there were only one viable prospect, then we could look at it on its merits. However, they are competing. They are competing for that housing tax credit from the state of Texas. One of the things I asked about was one of the things we were shown was the mix of senior housing, affordable housing versus family affordable housing. Now the current mix is about 71% in favor of senior housing and the balance going to family housing. But I specifically asked, do seniors have need for affordable housing in a greater proportion than families of just general age groups? And so the staff looked this up and came back very quickly with an answer. And at the 30% burden, housing burden, or cost burden, shall we, that's what it's termed, the 30% cost burden, meaning you spend 30% of your income on housing, only 5% of seniors versus 95% of families fell into the 30% cost burden. However, the general rule of thumb is to spend about 30% of your income on housing. So that's not necessarily a surprise. When you go to the 50% cost burden, that's where you spend 50% of your income on housing. That's a more objectively significant burden. Then the senior mix skyrocketed to 38% of seniors fell into that, and the balance, 62%, were in families. So, but the problem is that the senior community in Plano is only 12% of our population, which suggests that seniors have 3 times greater a need for affordable housing than your average family, which, due to socioeconomic and income ramifications, that kind of makes sense. So when you go back and look at our current mix of dedicated senior affordable housing versus family affordable housing, seniors currently have 2.5 times greater, but not 3 times greater availability for affordable housing. And the point was also made that if we have more affordable housing for seniors, because they don't really have anywhere to go right now in Plano, if they have that option to move, that will free up other housing that is more affordable for families. So all of this was discussed, all of this was debated, and ultimately we tabled it when we discovered quite anticlimactically, just before a big vote, that there was this discrepancy with how the population was counted for purposes of the housing tax credit. Now, I did say on the dais that if no waiver were required, I would go ahead and pass the approval for both of them to apply and let the state sort it out at that level. If they both have passed the criteria to be able to apply, and that's all this is, we're allowing them to apply to the state of Texas for the tax credit, then I don't have a problem with it. But in the case of having to grant a waiver, then obviously we would need to give that due consideration. That has been tabled until February 10th. And then truly anticlimactically, after about an hour of discussion of all this, we considered for about 3 minutes the specific use permit for an arcade at Park in 75. That was approved 7-0. We were down a council member this evening, and that was this evening's meeting. I'll see you next time on February 10th, and the drama will continue regarding the housing tax credit. I'm Shelby Williams for Plano City Council, Place 5. Good night.